Welcome to the Especially for Athletes podcast, where we explore essential principles that empower athletes to learn life's most valuable lessons through sports.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Especially for Athletes podcast. Dustin, how are you, brother?
Hey, Shad. Good to see you, buddy.
Good to see you, too. I'm so excited for this new format. Just as a reminder for those who are coming onto this podcast that we're doing a weekly podcast now. Each week of the month, we're going to focus on a different core principle from Especially for Athletes and look at what some professional athletes and college athletes and coaches and businessmen and women have taught us on these subjects. And so today we're focused on our core principle, Dustin, of compete without contempt. And you and I had a conversation with all-pro safety, future Hall of Famer, I'm sure, Eric Weddle, played at the University of Utah here, and then went on and had this illustrious NFL career, ended in like a storybook Super Bowl. He was coaching his 11U team when we had this conversation with him, and then they call him up and say, "We have so many injuries. Could you come back and help us?" And then he led the Rams to a Super Bowl championship. And Eric Weddle, every single thing he said, it was like a solid 60 minutes when he met with us of just, he's a very thoughtful person. But in regard to competing without contempt, he talked about something that I think is a key aspect of competing without contempt. And it's this within team competition. I mean, there's the obvious sportsmanship stuff when we're talking about playing our rival and stuff like that. But there's also this competition that exists within a team that sometimes we begin to compete with contempt when someone else starts to get playing time or gets opportunities that we feel like we deserve. And there could be this infighting and lack of unity within a team. And Eric Weddle talked about his philosophy in the NFL, and he actually attributed it a little bit to his longevity in the NFL, why he lasted so long, how he treated his teammates. And I just want to listen, Dustin, to what he said about that, and then to get your thoughts as a coach and on this topic of within team competition. So here's Eric Weddle.
You know, my last year in LA, right? I'm the new guy. You know, obviously people know who I am and know the career I had, but they don't know what type of player I am. So every day I had to show and prove that I can earn a spot on this team, right? And along the way, I'm helping others. So when Eric Weddle retires, who's the guy that takes over? John Johnson. And what did he do? He wore the headset just like I did the year before. And he sat right next to me for an entire season. And what did I do between any time the coach was talking? What was I doing with John Johnson? Explaining and coaching and helping him, because I knew that he's going to take over that role. And where did that ended up? He signs a 3-year deal in Cleveland for a lot of money that he did and earned. But that would have never happened. It may have happened. He's a really good player. But I would think that helping him and pushing him and competing in him, me and him would go in drills every day, and I'm trying to destroy him in DB drills as a 35-year-old. And he's a 22-year-old kid, right? Because I know I'm pushing him to be his very best. But there was never, like I said earlier, it was never ill will. It was never emotionally attached. And the best should always rise up, right? It should never be who your name is, who your parents are, this and that. And that was how I took it, right? If I'm trying my hardest and I'm just not good enough, then so be it. I can live with that. But at the end of the day, my best is usually pretty much better than everybody else until it isn't. And you have to understand that and have that understanding that it's okay to be both sides.
So Dustin, what do you think? What do you think of his philosophy, and what thoughts came to you as he talked about competing with his own teammates?
Well, my first thought was, I wonder if people listening really believe Eric. And, you know, I've had enough conversations with Eric to know that what he said is true. And what I mean by that is that I could easily see people saying, well, yeah, that sounds great, but did you really want to help a person, a player who was 13 years younger than you, who was coming for your job, whose goal was ultimately, if he plays, that means you're not playing. So he could push Eric out of the league. And this isn't like you don't play for the 14U basketball team. This is you lose your way of living. This is this is a job. This is professional sports. So that's why so many professional athletes usually aren't super invested in helping their in-team competitor, especially at their position, because they could lose their job if that person got to be better than them. But Eric's approach of he didn't care about that. He was more interested in being an elite teammate. Is the reason for that is that Eric Weddle cared more about winning than he did about personally being recognized. And the athletes who are more interested in winning, that's what drives them, is winning at whatever costs. And they can be okay if somebody else does well and they don't get the attention as long as they win. That's really the fuel that's driving them. It's easier for those types of athletes than to cheer on and be happy for their teammates' successes instead of feeling threatened by it. Because if they're getting the attention, I'm not. If they're getting the MVP awards or being written about online or whatever, or on social media, and I'm not, that's an attack on me. They don't look at it that way. They look at it as, no, that means we're playing well. And if we're winning and as a team doing well, but in sports, that can be really tough. And I can tell you at the pro levels, I know for a fact that's really tough. I talked to a president of a major league, it was an NBA basketball team just 2 weeks ago. And he told me that in the NBA, athletes first want to be respected by their peers. They want their peers to respect their game. They second want to get paid. And the third thing is they want to win, most of them. So they kind of go through this process where the last thing is that no matter what now, I've got the money, I've got the respect now of I want to win a championship. But they usually don't come into the league hell-bent on championship or bust. It's I need to get paid. I want to be respected by my fellow competitors, and then the winning comes later. I believe Eric Weddle was one of the unicorns in that sense. That I really do feel like he came in with that attitude of all I want to do is win, and I do want to be the greatest. But in that podcast, Shad, he mentioned at the beginning of that podcast in his last year with LA. That wasn't his last year with LA. We did that episode before he returned to LA. This is just 4 or 5 months before he returned to LA. They called him out of retirement and he went back and led him to the Super Bowl. When we did this episode, it was before that. But he did say that he would help his opponent, his in-team opponent. So not his opponent, and his teammate, who is his opponent when they're in drills at practice, right? But on Sundays, they're on the same team. He had no problem with helping that guy get better. And we asked him, well, didn't you feel threatened that they could take your job? And he said something to the line of, yeah, I did. But that made me have to wake up the next day and work even harder because I just gave some of my tools that took me years to sharpen to this rookie, right? I have to go find a new tool. And so understanding that the better you are, if you're on my team, the better you get, especially if we play the same position, is the better I have to get in order to keep my job. So we both can help each other if we're both pushing each other. And in order to do that, you have to love the game and respect the game. And you have to respect the process enough to be willing to lose sometimes at practice and maybe even lose some playing time. But you want to win by beating your opponent at their very best. You don't want to get the spot because your opponent messes up. You don't want to win a game because the other team plays bad. You want to beat them at their very best. I want you to play your very best, and I still want to beat you and be able to walk out having know that you gave everything you had today and played your very best game possible and still lost. To me, that's the ultimate competitor. Not because you made a mistake that and that's why I won. I'm not hoping that you screw up in order for me to play, to take your spot, or hoping that you screw up in order for us to get the win. I need you to make an error. No, I want you to make a great play. I just want you to not be able to make it because I'm that much faster, stronger, and better than you, as are my teammates. That does not happen if you don't have teammates put their egos aside and say, I need you to push me so hard to where I want to quit because of practices so that games become easy. Practices against you have to be harder than games against the team in the other jersey is going to be this weekend. And until you get that with the team, you just have a bunch of individuals interested in accolades and awards and highlights on SportsCenter. You never really have a team. And really, at the end, everybody loses because I don't get any better if you just screw up a lot. And that's why I play.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I need you to be your very best, and I still got to beat you. That's how I become my best. He was smart enough to recognize that because he was a 5'11", 200-pound athlete who made it to the NFL and is going to be a Hall of Famer. He didn't get there just because he was a freak athlete, bigger, faster, stronger than everybody, no matter what. He wasn't highly recruited coming out of high school. He had to earn it. And in order for him to stay in the league as long as he stayed in it, his approach was, I got to earn it. Not every year. I got to earn this thing every rep of every practice, every day. And that's why he lasted so long.
Do you notice what he said about his teammate? Like, they tried to kill each other in practice every day.
Yeah.
So when we say compete without contempt, right? Even within team, you mentioned this, but part of competing without contempt is leave the without contempt part out for a second. Part of what we're trying to teach is compete. Like, you show up every day and you try to kill the person who's in front of you, not hurt, but dominate, destroy, I think was the word that he used there, right? That helps them get better. When you start pouting because you're not playing or thinking other people are getting the position that you deserve or that you want, or you give up, then you're making your team worse. And I think an important part of what he said was, I showed up every day and I tried to destroy that teammate in every drill. But then we get off the field and we put on the headset, and I'm trying to teach him everything that he doesn't know that I do know. And I think that's an important part of this within team competition, that it's not just I save my greatest effort for my opponent, but I'm not going to play that hard against my own team. I love my team. You are doing a huge disservice to your team if you do not show up to practice and lovingly try to destroy that person in front of you. But then after, you're great friends. You try to help them to succeed. And I think that was a really important part. And I know you're passionate about that part of it, Dustin. I have one other question I want to ask you after this, but would you just talk to that portion of what he taught us there? To be a great teammate, you need to show up and you need to fiercely compete with your own teammates every day. Why is that so important?
Because you have to respect me or love me enough as your teammate to want me to get better. And I can't do that if you let me off the hook. That's an offense to me, right? If it's the same way with our kids sometimes as for adults, right? If we don't truly give our kids the advantage if all we do is make life easy for them. We have to love them enough to sometimes let them fail, as hard as that is, or let them figure out the answer to something that we might know the answer to and might be able to speed that process up for them, but they need to sit in it for a minute. Maybe a minute means for a week. Like, they need to have to figure some things out. And instead of us always swooping down and saying, do this, do this, do this, and then do that. That's what works. I've had this happen to me a million times. Well, how are we going to build the resiliency in them if we don't let them figure some of these things out? Sure, we need to come down and help them and guide them a little bit. But there are certain things that it's not going to be the end of the world if it takes them a week or two to figure it out. In fact, they're going to be better in a year or two from now from having us allowed them to have to figure it out. So as your teammate, or you as my teammate, if you really care about me enough as my teammate to want to see me get better, you're going to bring it every single practice. And you're not going to worry about my feelings. And you're not going to worry about whether or not I leave practice upset or defeated. You want me to feel that way, not because you hate me, right? Not because you want to see me angry or sad or whatever. It's because you want to see me have to shift to a higher gear and work even harder. And then when I do that, you're going to tell me how happy you are for me. Yeah. When you get that sort of camaraderie within a team where everybody's lifting everybody and the rising sea lifts all the ships because the sea we're all interested in lifting and going together, then you have a really powerful team. If not, you can have a bunch of really good players all rowing in different directions and at different paces and different times, and the boat doesn't go anywhere. And though you see that all the time with teams. Why didn't they win? On paper, look at all these guys that were so good and they're so much bigger and faster and stronger, and they don't win. That's the beauty. To me, that's the thing about sports that I love the most is, and I don't know what the answer is to it. I have coached teams and played on teams that had no business doing as well as they did. And I've had other teams, one of them was with you in college, where we should have been much better than we were. But for other reasons and distractions and not everybody on the same page, we never got close to fulfilling the potential that we had. And it was because that whole camaraderie we didn't have. In our case, I don't think we had the right kind of leadership, and it can destroy teams. And so as a teammate, you're doing me a disservice if you don't do everything you can at every practice to make me fail and to make me want to give up and say, fine, I concede, you're better than me. And if you did do that, right, a good teammate would pick him up and say, are you kidding me? You're quitting? Shame on you. You don't quit. Figure it out. We're going to do this again. Like, you do not quit. That's how we all get better. You have to have that sort of focus or you never reach your full potential.
Yeah. Dustin, the best team I ever played on was in Southern California, basketball, huge. Schools are huge. We were in the top division. It's 1AA there. And we had this team that made it to the semifinals in California, which is huge.
Big deal.
Right?
Yeah.
Big deal. Like, I think I looked at it, 11 of the players on that basketball team went on and played a college sport. So wow. Just super athletic. But one thing that we took pride in is that our second team was as good as our first team. Now, that probably wasn't exactly true, but there were times in practice where our second team took it to the first team.
Yeah.
And I honestly think it was like this upward spiral that the hardest game that we ever played was practice. When we started to play another team, it was like, oh gosh, I could breathe a little bit. Like, these guys aren't suffocating me on defense, And I honestly think that's what made that team so great, was the second team that pushed that first team. And that led to just my last thought here. And then just any closing thoughts you have on this as we talk about competing without contempt within team competition. I think that team captains who listen to this should really think about how they can intentionally create that environment where practice is about going after one another, making that the hardest competition that they will face that week, including the opponent that you're going to play. And that we foster this idea that we are about killing each other so that we can help each other be better for the game. And a leader that can foster that atmosphere in practice, mingled with the love and respect that you have for one another, that you're not standing over your teammate. You're not trying to make your teammate look stupid. You're not trying to create divisions within your team. You're not doing all those things to showboat and make someone feel self-conscious, even though they're trying their best. But you are trying to destroy them in order to make them better, so that when the Friday night lights are on, when that basketball court, the national anthem is over, or whatever the setting might be, they're prepared because you've prepared them. And I think that if team captains knew that was one of their roles, to foster that atmosphere, they could create that healthy within team competition that will make the whole team better. And I love what Eric Weddle taught us there. I think it's so applicable to every team at every level. Any final thoughts you have on this before we close up the episode?
Just that as a coach or as a parent of athletes that you're trying to get them to compete at their highest possible level, that we have to make them earn being great. That you can't give them greatness. You might be able to award them at practice and make it easy to be great, but you cut their legs out from underneath them if you do that, because when the real game comes and the other team isn't going to give you anything and they really have to dig deep, they have to have a shovel that's sharp enough and strong enough to dig deep, or they'll never get the depth that they need to win the game. And that goes back to practice time. And so worrying about feelings and worrying about all that stuff in practice, look, the word respect is really important in that. I have to respect you. I'm not trying to embarrass you in a way that I destroy your confidence, right? But that's what you do there is you celebrate small victories. When you're coaching somebody and they do it right, you have to make a big deal about it. You got to make sure that
team leader, like
yes.
If you're a team captain and you see someone who's been struggling, do it right. You better make a big deal of it.
Yeah. And talk about them to the rest of the team and point them out and make sure they know, if the rest of the team knows that how hard they've been working and they did it today and they beat us today. He pushed me, so he beat so-and-so today, right? He needs to know, so that kid feels some pride. And then as a group, if you all feel like, look, everybody is sharp and everybody's trying to, we're all battling with each other, because you'll practice 100 times more or compete 100 times more against your teammates than you will against an opposing team, a different color jersey. You're competing with your teammates for hours every single day for months and months and months. That's where you sharpen your blade. It's not in games, it's in practice. So practices have to have a level of competition to them, and a level of so much competition that there is a level of embarrassment to some degree. But then and that's where you really earn your stripes. Like as a leader, Shad, I mean, if you're my teammate and I'm seeing you regularly in those moments, tucking your tail and wanting to go be by yourself and putting your head down, I can't trust you now. Like you're going to lose respect from me if you don't get back and fight. As soon as you start to say, I can't do this and I'm fine, you're better than me, and you leave, like I've lost respect for you. Even if coach puts you back in, I'm going to have a hard time looking you in the eye now because you quit. You gave up when it got real. You let me walk on you multiple times and just conceded to the fact that I'm the senior and you're not, or I'm the varsity guy and you're not. If that's the case, you lose the respect of your teammates because you're not tough enough to keep swinging. That's a much harder spot to earn back. You don't just get that in a practice or two. So we got to push our athletes to understand that, and the leaders have to be humble enough to accept when they have to be pushed. Yep. Right? You want the Rams hitting each other. Like you got to get your dudes together, and the dudes have to compete. And I think good coaches are constantly finding ways to pit their alphas against each other, and in a healthy way, to try to let everybody say that even the ones on this team are going to battle sometimes for and that alpha can change from day to day or from rep to rep. But that's how you create an entire team of just fierce killers out there, that when it's time to now put on the same jersey on a Saturday morning or Friday night or whatever the game is, everybody now comes together, because now you're playing no longer for the name on, your first and last name. You're playing for your community now. We all put all that aside. Now we're just playing for our school or for our city or for our state or whatever. And we're more interested in winning at this point than we are who plays or who doesn't. It's just winning. And that's when you create a family feeling and you have what's special, that you only know it if you've been in it as a player, as a coach. It's hard to get it. And sometimes you try really hard and you just never capture that magical team feeling. But when you have it, that's the addiction that keeps people in sports, keeps coaches coaching. As much as they hate it sometimes, when you get that perfect recipe, man, it's, unless you're in it, you don't even know how cool it is. But It's what makes sports so great.
I agree, man. And you use the word respect there. If you have a teammate that rolls over, first of all, I think a team captain needs to address that and help them build that resilience. That's part of your role. Like, hey, man, don't give up. Get up right now. Stop pouting. Let's go. Like, hit me. Like, I think that could be addressed and people can learn that. But I think the word respect is one word, and I agree with it. I also think when you were saying that, I was like, yeah, it's a trust thing too. Because when that other team is hitting, like, you don't want someone that's going to roll over in the heat of battle with you. And so I love that. And I love Eric Weddle. I love what he taught here. If especially team leaders, not just them, but especially team leaders, if you take an Eric Weddle approach, I don't care how far you go in sports, that approach, helping those around you be better, everyone wants someone on their team, in their organization, even in their family, that is intent on unselfishly helping those around them to be better. And I love that aspect. And it's a really important aspect of Compete Without Contempt. So it's fun discussing that with you today, Dustin.
One other thing, Shad, I might say, you've talked about the captains a couple of times, is that if you have a captain who ducks competition or who tries to duck being singled out in front of the team by a coach or by a player, then you don't have the right captain. Because I believe, my personal philosophy is that as a coach, I've got to push my captains in front of the team more than anybody. I need the team to see that I'll get on the butt of the captain more than I will anybody on the team. And the captains have to know that if you're going to sit in this captain's chair, that's going to be a hot seat, because you're going to have a coach on you constantly, because you are expected to be, you have to be better than everybody in a lot of different areas, as a leader, as a mental toughness and resiliency, and hopefully as an athlete. But sometimes your captains aren't always your greatest athletes, but those other things, they have to be strong in. I don't allow you to become that if I treat you with kid gloves while I'm being tough with everybody else. And the players see that, these guys are protected with bubble wrap on them while everybody else is being pushed. So you almost have to go out of your way, in my opinion, to make sure the whole team sees the captains get it more than you do, so that when the captains do tell the rest of the team to pick it up or to go harder, the team can say, yeah, well, he's kind of earned that. I mean, I've seen how coach treats him. Or when me as the coach, if I come at you and you're not a captain, you don't go home and say, he only picks on he only really comes at this particular group and expects them, but he doesn't expect the captains or the varsity guys they better win every sprint. They better be there earlier and leave later than everybody. They better be the best in classrooms. If not, then you have the wrong captains, and it's just lip service to everybody. And eventually that'll catch up to you. Awesome. Anyway, that's my last thought on it.
Awesome thought. Thank you, everyone, for joining the Especially for Athletes podcast. Compete without contempt, even within your own team. Eyes up. Do the work.
Thank you for joining the Especially for Athletes podcast. To learn more about Especially for Athletes organization, get a copy of our book, The Sportlight, or to bring our program to your team, school, business, or organization, visit us at especiallyforathletes.org.